Hello. I wanted to have a brief little rant discussion, even on my channel, about a position on a topic that I think is just very important and is becoming more and more of a very everyday thing. As you can see by the title, it is something along the lines of a brief rant of my sensible position on transgenderism. So, I'm not gonna beat around the bush. Let's shoot the shit. All right. This is not a scripted video, by the way. You probably could tell. Um, this video is mostly a pro-transgender video. Now, that may come off as a surprise to you, a lot of my longtime viewers, and maybe my friends, family, even who watch my videos, may think that I'm inconsistent. But let me explain. Um, I am, for the most part, in terms of my credentials and identity, I am a centralist for the most part. And I don't even like that word because it's not true. I'm more so apolitical when it comes to politics. I think politics is a mess for a lot of reasons. I think for the most part, though, that most people are more centralist or apolitical than they think. I think that people need to realize that they can't exactly align a lot of their views, one to one, of course, with any party, right, left, or, independent. I think that, every situation is a person to person basis with different point of views. But back to the topic, I digress. I also want to clarify some potential conflict of interest. Some people may see it as. But yes, I am an Asian American cisgendered male. And I'm not really in that sphere of, knowing many like sexualities or many of the new words. Okay, I am for the most part actually rather a traditional person. I'm not exactly the no um, when it comes to that, but I am, of course, also a medical professional. I am a doctor, and I think this is just something that not many people get to explore in a very educated sense, or just being on the internet, being on Discord. People have many funny things to say, many offensive and silly things to say. Sometimes they're not jokes, though. A lot of times they spill in between the levels of irony and also a level of just malice. So let's dive into the topic. Why is this mostly a pro transgender video? Well, um, the part of why I believe my view is sensible is that here's the thing about transgenderism, okay? The people who go against transgenderism, if their place and position is not coming from a place of concern, like sympathy, then what is it? It's hate, right? And I am a firm believer that hate is something that is taught. Hate may be something that's experienced and becomes generalization. Like maybe a person had a negative experience with a certain type of person, and they begin to have a bias against those type of people. And of course, that's not like a very healthy approach. I don't need to explain that to you. That's a whole other can of worms of like racism, for example. But given that, right, if you disagree with transgenderism, a pretty big argument is that, it damages one's body irreversibly, or at least the more neutral approach would be to say it will alter someone's body. And a lot of times it can be permanent. Okay. And so see that underlying that comes from a place of concern, right? That isn't a place of hate. Unfortunately, there is a bit of or a lot of overlap with that. Like a lot of times those things aren't exactly separated, right? A lot of times people hate and also people are sympathizing and they don't realize that. We're 4 minutes in and I haven't delved too much in the topic. It's very nuanced. I apologize. But if you're entertaining this, let me continue. So that's the part where most of it is at a fundamental level, right? If you disagree with transgenderism, you believe that people are harming themselves irreversibly, right? And if that's true, that's a very sensible take. I can't argue with that, right? Where we would argue about that is we would need to see how it affects people and if it has good outcomes or not for the individuals, which we'll get into. If you are for transgenderism, that is an act of autonomy, in my opinion, and I am a firm believer of autonomy. I believe that people should be able to do what they want to do so long as it does not affect other people around them in a negative way. And then obviously that can be a very nuanced topic too. There's a lot of arguments to be held for and against of what I've just said, which we will dive into. I don't intend this to be a very long video, but honestly, the way I'm going about this is probably like 30 minutes. So let's continue. Um, so the way I see it is that, I've already written about this briefly in a Discord server today, actually, is that the only possible and sensible way to view transgenderism is from a point of sympathy, regardless of where you are on the agreement or disagreement for it. Because again, if you disagree with transgenderism, it comes from a place of concern. You think people are harming themselves, you think they're harming people around them potentially, and so that is still a form of sympathy, right? You are concerned for the well-being of others. Okay? That's sensible. But if you are also for transgenderism, it is also a place of sympathy because to attempt to become more self-actualized, to become more comfortable with one's identity, that's not an easy thing for everyone. We think about like minorities and marginalized groups, groups that are less accounted for, right? I sound very woke right now, but this is just the fucking language you need to use to talk about things like this because it's true. There's a level of truth to this. People have thought about this, okay? So don't just dismiss me because I just said some terms that may be aligned more with leftist or right, whatever, okay? Hear me out. It comes from a place of sympathy no matter how you spin it, okay? Because if you do believe in transgenderism as well, you are in support of a task that is a lot harder than people realize. Refer back to like the many centuries and the past few decades where homosexual men were closeted for a long time, and only as of recent they've become more accepted and assimilated into society, right? Um, that's another can of worms too. But for the most part, I would like to think that homosexual men or women, lesbian, I think that's the word for women. I'm not entirely sure. They've become more normal in society, and I also agree with that. That's fine. I don't think people necessarily choose their sexuality, just as people don't choose their fetishes or what they are just attracted to. It's the same vein, the same cloth. Essentially, tying that back into transgenderism, it's a hard task. Okay, this is a very not necessarily new idea, but it's a very rapidly changing idea, and it's become more and more of a talking point in the last 10 years in America. And I think that regardless of how you spin it, again, it's from a place of sympathy. So I can't help but feel like, I'm rooting for them. I think that transgenders have it hard, and I think that I would commend them for trying to be more comfortable in their own skin. There's harmful comments like transgenders don't accept themselves, so they transition, and that's just like a very disgusting and weak and bad faith argument. I mean, forget transgenderism for a second. Let's think about anything at all. People have a hard time getting comfortable with what they like, and people are always judged. We live in a very, at least the Western society, Eastern too, the world, sure. The world is a very judgmental place, and taking a plunge into doing something that is considered extreme and different is to some extent just a very commendable task. I mean, think about artists, they're all very experimental and they risk everything to do what they want to do to become more comfortable and become more familiar with what they're liking. It's the same thing here, okay? And I'm tired of people online being so discriminatory and so hateful to these groups of people. It's just terrible. I'm not fucking a stranger to people being dicks, and I've also been on the other side of this argument. Okay, I have said very harmful and mean things, and I regret it. I've matured, and I think that my views have changed as I've looked at the topics more and more. To address some other vocal points against transgenderism, people say things like, "Oh, the suicide rates." That's a big one. That was a meme for a long time, um, and I think that's incredibly disgusting. I mean, the truth is, again, being transgender is a topic that is just or just an action that's just very hard. Like it's incredibly hard to be able to get hormones first of all and to get approved for this process. It's also very hard to like explain this to society. Think about how would you explain that to your mom and your dad? Same thing as with being homosexual, right? Coming out is a very big deal for many people of these groups. And also, again, the people in society are not really doing them any favors, giving them looks, calling them names, and rejecting them out of society. Of course, they would be more prone to suicide, right? They live harder lives. Okay, simply put, the identity behind gender and sex alone, right, is very fundamental to like a personality thing, right? And to be thrown out for what you are, well, that would bother anyone. That would drive anyone to harmful thoughts. So that's not a very good argument, right? Um, Moving forward to like, I don't want to say that it is, of course, a foolproof thing. Like, obviously, it's not. It's a very nuanced topic, of course. Um, but all these studies that do look into like suicide rates, for example, none of these researchers or scientists are going to say it's solely because of transgenderism. That would be fucking stupid. Okay, That's how you ruin your career, even if you did believe that. That is just inflammatory and wrong, okay? What they will agree on is that it's multifaceted. Again, going back to the fact that society has a hard time accepting these groups of people, right? And that's terrible. I mean, if you want to go as far as saying that they are mentally ill, right, then you're essentially kicking people on the ground for being crippled, right? And is any of these people going to say they happily are bullying and crippling and are against these people and kicking them on the floor? I'd hope not. I mean, if you want to be taken seriously and seen as a rational human being, I don't think you would ever want to do that. That's just disgusting. I mean, no one here is wanting to throw people out of their wheelchairs and kick them, right? But that's the thing. When people talk about this topic, a lot of times the extremists are really within that vein. They're hateful people. Okay. Um, Ultimately, yeah. Like I'm not saying that it is exactly the best thing in the world. I'm really not. That too. Okay. Again, I said mostly pro, but I understand that there is failure. Okay. There are some controversial topics that I should talk about too, and I will. I want to be very neutral about this. This is a sensible discussion. Okay. So arguments against transgenderism that have some merit. And again, I want to be careful with what I'm saying with my word choice. Don't you dare try to take this out of context, okay? Um, so, the most like quote unquote efficacious results in transgenderism is when people start younger. And that just makes sense because of puberty. But at the same time, that's a catch 22 because things such as identity is a very developing and ongoing thing within one's life. And children aren't exactly within their right minds to make big decisions, okay? That's why they can't vote. That's why they can't join the military. That's why they can't gamble or buy certain substances, buy alcohol, for example. Yes, okay? That's not a very hard topic to understand. Um, and, I'm a firm believer that it's very much less of a good idea to recommend that to children, transgenderism, that is, because, it is something you can't really turn back from to some extent. Bone structure and whatnot, and the effects of puberty and hormone blockers in younger developing minds. The thing is, though, most transgenders are starting when they're older, okay? They start when they're adults for the most part. And, whether that be because they were closeted for a long time and thought they wouldn't be accepted, or because the process is hard, or because society doesn't think it's okay for children to start younger, it's just very multifaceted, okay? And I will say, for the most part, I am of one of the perspective that it isn't something that should be exactly advertised to children. Again, because the consequences are rather large. Okay, it's not that I don't believe in it. It's not that I don't believe in success stories either. But think about like age consent, for example. It's just kind of a topic that is very much like we need our youth to be more educated first before they make bigger decisions like that. I think people can still be can still go through a process like transgenderism and have successful results in adults. And when they're in adults, they can make more sensible decisions to see if this is truly what they want. Okay, I don't exactly know numbers about the rates of transgenders who detransition, for example. But that isn't to scoff at the successful results, minority or majority being good. Like people need to understand that it's not really a matter of statistics with something so personal like this. Okay, it if it works out for the individual. That's what you need to remember above and beyond all. This is kind of a robotic example, but think about businesses, for example. The man who took out the loan to start a successful business, he had a dream and he tried to do it. And either he becomes the next Elon Musk, well, not it's not Elon Musk. I fucking don't really like that guy. But if he becomes the next billionaire, right? He made it, sure. But if he failed, then he tried. He tried to make his dream happen. And you know what? It's really the same thing here. Okay, autonomy, everyone. Respect autonomy. People want to do what they want to do. And again, so long as it's not harming other people, we should respect those decisions. It's really that simple. Um, Again, this is more of a neutralist approach to this topic. And it kind of saddens me that this topic is so widely debated in a lot of ways that I don't think are very progressive. And I don't mean like, oh, they're not really like left winged when I say progressive. I mean, as a society, we need to come together and realize that we can't just like wish this away. We can't just bully them until they stop existing. We can't just support them and uh, what is it? Incite fuel to a flame of potentially endangering or encouraging self harm. Again, I am a very neutral person on this topic because it's incredibly nuanced. How could you not be? just food for thought, okay? Think about it a little more. I would really love for any discussions in the comments also. Please feel free to, so long as you're being, polite. I don't want to see slurs. I don't want to see very charged points. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having passion, but just try to keep it tame, is what I'm saying, okay? To continue this discussion, we're 15 minutes in. Thank you if you've entertained it up to this point. And I don't think I'll be making a very visually stimulating video for this. I think I'll make it a picture because there's no way I'm editing 15 minutes of me talking about this. Um, but yeah, the most sensible approach is that it is developing and it's ongoing. And research has shown that there have been successful results in gender affirming care. And research has also shown that there is a correlation, not causation. Remember, anyone who actually has taken a statistics course or knows anything about statistics and deviations and the bell curve, right, know that outliers exist, and we know that correlation is not causation, okay? So, but there is a correlation between transgenderism and self-harm. That isn't to say that it causes self-harm. No, not at all. It's incredibly multifaceted, again, with society stuff, bullying and whatnot, acceptance. But yes, I am one to believe it in a sympathetic light. That is all. Um, Honestly, it's an exhausted point, and I don't feel like there's much more I could say about this, other than, I support autonomy above and beyond all. And I hope that maybe, if you disagree with me, or maybe you agree with me, that you've heard something here that helped you, nurture your beliefs, made you think. Again, please, by all means, comment in the discussion, or excuse me, leave comments in the comment section, and I'd love to reply and see your views on it. I really hope that this speaks to someone. Otherwise, I wouldn't talk about it. Um, and one more comment is that, this channel, this YouTube channel, has always been really about weird avant garde art and self help. I believe this to be a form to push towards self help. So, you know, I hope that maybe you can send this to someone who's, maybe a little snuffed in their views, and maybe you could snap them out of it, or any one of you guys. If you guys feel like, again, if you feel like I'm an idiot, please comment. I would love to have a discussion about this. I think that we live in a very polar society right now. We live in a very charged and him versus me, mob mentality, eat him up, kill him type of world right now. And it really breaks my heart. Um, I wish that people became more in touch with being a little more sensitive, honestly. I don't mean being like offended or triggered and all that like anti SJW shit, okay? I mean, people need to be more astute to the fact that they're talking to people, and that you don't necessarily need to agree with people also. That also doesn't mean you have to hate them or cast them aside. I think that these things are very, you know, obvious and clear, but unfortunately, more and more am I seeing my brothers turn once against another, and it is just disheartening. It leaves me confused, and yeah, this is a topic that I thought that maybe if I started a series, that this would be a really strong start to it. So yeah, thank you for indulging the past 18 minutes and 43 seconds of me talking about this. This has been PH Donnie, Fadani, Jesu, Yesu, Blibit Moin Freud. And for the rant stuff, I'm gonna say this is your one and only soft spoken, punished little retard talking about it. Bye bye.